Hello. So I hope you're having a nice day. So sometime back I created this nice angular sidebar, which you can see here. It was a three-part series and it went really popular. So you can see this graph here of the views, and this usually means your video is getting quite a lot of traction on YouTube. So till now the first video has got about 16,000 views. But the most interesting thing was in the comments. So in the comments, I got multiple comments from people who wanted a sort of a nested sidebar as a follow-up to this tutorial. So for example, you can see here Pratik who wants, could you provide one more tutorial with nested menu in the side nav? Similarly, there were two more at least who wanted this functionality. So in this video, I'm going to do exactly that. And we're going to build up this functionality in the same YouTube style sidebar that we built previously. And you can see that it nicely opens up, nicely closes, and the arrow is there to identify whether this is a nested item or not. And when you click on this, you can go in the nested roots, which is a subroot of this content root. And then we can collapse it like before, and everything neatly tucks in. And it also works in the collapse state. So this expanding and contracting also works in the collapse state, and everything works as before. I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. So make sure till you watch till the end, because at the end we are going to add this nice little animation here, which I found really nice. We're using the Angular Animations API in this. Okay, so before starting, but I'll just point you to the link in the description to the previous playlist if you have not already watched this tutorial. So if you want to get started by watching the tutorial where I actually built up this YouTube sidebar from scratch, you can actually find the link in the description, or it's also given in the video linked above. Okay, I'm going to start from just the nested sidebar functionality in this video. Okay, so let's get started. So this was the point where we ended in the last video, but we need to add a nested sidebar functionality here. So where do we start? So the first thing, if we look at our code here, we are going to find out the type of the menu item itself. And this is where types really help. So we can have a starting point for how do we want to store that data. So here we have the icon, the label, and the root. But now we also want a nested items within some of the roots. So we are going to add a sub items property here, and this is going to be the type of the same. It's because it's going to be exactly the same, and it's just going to be an array. That's the only thing that is different. Now I have kept it optional because not all items are going to keep the sub items. So if they have sub items, we are only going to provide nesting for those roots. All right. Okay. So the next step, you want to add this to our data as well. So I decided to add the sub items to the content root here because it makes sense. So I'm just going to copy some of the data here that I already have, and let me do it sub items here. And I'm just going to copy this in. So we have the icon, label, and the root for the specific sub items. Great. So we have all of the data that we need to render it on the screen. So what's next? Now, when we look at the template code a bit here, to add the sub items, we're going to see that we have quite a large mat list item template here. And if you're going to add some more menu items here, it's going to be a bit more large than I would want in my component itself. So a good idea here would be to first refactor it into a subcomponent so that we can clean up our template a bit as well. So to do that, we are going to create a new component here. So let's create a new component, ngGC, T is for component, and we're going to put this in the components folder, and we're going to call this the menu item. This is going to contain all of the functionality for a specific menu item. Okay, now you can see that we have a menu item component inside of our components. Okay, so we have to shift all of our functionality of the menu item there. But before that, we'll notice that you will have an ng for here. Now, since this is on Angular 18, I've already upgraded to that. So we are going to use a new control flow. So let's shift this. Let's remove this from here. And let's shift this to a for loop here for item of menu items. And this track is really important for performance reasons. So we need a unique sort of data for this work properly. So we are going to give label, assuming that the label is going to be unique. We are not going to have the same items, the same name for any of the menu items because it doesn't make sense. Okay, so we are going to shift the list item within this. Okay. And let's just test it out again and see whether it works fine. So yeah, it works the same. Now during any refactor, it is a good idea to keep checking things to see whether they are the same before and after refactoring. All right. So the next thing we need to do obviously is to shift all of this code to our menu item. So let's open our menu item, or in fact, let's go back to the custom side nav and let's open it here side by side so that we can copy this here. So it's empty at this point. We're just going to copy all of this code here. Okay, let's copy this here. Okay, lots of errors, but we can resolve them one by one. But before that, we have shifted all of the code, but we also have some styles linked to it so that you can see the menu item, the selected menu item, etc. So let's also shift these styles. Now this host style is also needed. So we are going to shift this host style as well because we need it for the animations within it. Similarly, we are going to shift this menu item, selected menu item as well. And this we are going to remove from here because we don't need it anymore. And this is one of the benefits of sort of creating subcomponents because your original component will automatically get smaller and more maintainable for the future. All right. So this is fine. And now let's remove these errors. So you can see that we have a matlist item here. So it's clear that we need the matlist module here. All right. Then you can see we have router link here. So that means we need the router module here. And then you can see that we have an item here as well. But before that, we can also see that we have a mat icon. So we need a mat icon here. Great. And after that, I don't think we have anything else left for us. So we have just this item. And so now this is because we don't have the item in this component. We had that item there because it was referring to the item of the menu item. So what we need is we need an input here, which we're going to pass in from that parent component. So let's add the input here. Let's call this item. This will be a signal input and the type will be the menu item. And let's also make this a required item because we do need to give this input, otherwise the menu item is not going to work. All right. So this is item.root. We are just going to shift this item to use the signal, the input signal. Here as well, we are going to do item.icon, and also within this we have item.label. Great. Now we'll notice another thing that we have the side nav collapse signal here, which we are using. So we also need to pass on the collapse state of the side nav as well. So let's add another signal here or input. This we are going to do as boolean, or in fact if we have it boolean, we don't actually need to give the type explicitly, so we're just going to give it false here. All right, so this is then going to be, we can replace this with the collapsed state. Great. All right, so this component seems to be whatever we need, and let's then use this component here. How do we use this? We are going to do app menu item, which is the selector for this, and then we are going to use the quick tips here, quick fix, and it's all automatically going to suggest to us that we need to import it from here. Great. So we have imported this. Obviously, now it requires the required inputs. So what will be the required input for us first? The item is going to be the item that we get from this for loop here, and the collapse state is going to be the side nav collapse signal here. All right. Great. So let's test this out to see whether it is the same as before. As I said, refactoring is really important to test out everything. Okay, so this doesn't seem to be fine. So let's see what is happening here. Okay, yeah. So the issue is that we are still using ngIf, but we're not actually importing the module for it. So instead of ngIf, all we're going to do is that we are going to shift this to the new control flow, which is going to go here. So we're going to do if and collapse just false. And within this, we are going to add our label here. Okay, so let's test this out now, and you can see now this works exactly as before. The collapsing works as before, and everything else as well. Great. We have refactored it and made it more maintainable for the future. And now we can go on and add our menu item itself. So now you can see the custom side nav component is now much better looking. It's more concise. Now we can go in the menu item and add our required functionality here. Okay. So next what we want to do to add our side nav nested functionality is obviously we need a signal to herald whether the nested menu is open or not, because we wanted to expand and contract. So let's add a signal here called nested menu open, and this will be a signal which will be initially false. Okay. So now what do we need to actually show on the UI when there are sub items for a specific menu item? So you'll notice when I showed you that before, we actually have a drop down arrow here. That drop down is going to show to the user that it has nested sub items. So how do we show that here? Now we have this matlist item here. At the end of this, we are going to add an if condition, and we are going to say that if item dot sub items, that means that we need to show the drop down icon at the right side. Okay. So we are going to add a span inside of this. Now, how are we gonna style this span? We are going to style this span using the built-in directive provided by the material list item, and that is mat list item meta. So the meta directive actually is going to style your whatever you provide in there in such a way that is going to put it on the right side where any possible buttons are in a mat list item. Okay, so we don't have to do any custom styling for it. And within that, we are going to give the mat icon. Now we are going to use expand more, which is a drop down arrow. So let's try and see how this looks like. Now when we look at here, we are going to see that the content has this drop down here. But we also want to switch it between the up arrow and the down arrow. So we are going to switch that on the basis of the nested menu open signal. So if the nested menu is open, we are going to do expand underscore less, because that means that we need to contract it, and then when it is this, we need to expand it more. Okay, fine. But how do we switch between the nested menu open being false and true? So for that, we need to add a click event handler in our mat list item here. So let's add a click event handler and let's do toggle nested. And in toggle nested, we are going to provide this functionality. So if you're going to do toggle nested here, it's going to be a function. And within that, first, we're going to check if the item has a sub item or not. So if it does not have a sub item, we're just going to return this from here without doing anything, because that means that we don't need any nesting behavior. Other than that, we are just going to switch the nested menu open to the inverse of the existing value. So this dot nested menu open, the value, and we're going to make this false. So if it's true, it's going to be false. If it's false, it's going to be true. Great. So let's test this out, whether this toggling functionality works. We're going to save this and let's try it out here. So when we click on this, you can see now the signal is changing, and as a result, the icon is changing here as well. Great. Okay, so now we only need to add the menu items themselves, this nested menu items. So we are going to add an if condition here below that, and we are going to again check for the same thing, item dot sub items. So if there are sub items, then we are going to show that, and also another condition, which is when the nested menu open is true. All right, when the signal is true, that means we want to open the menu. So within that, we are going to put a div here. Within this div, we are going to add all of our sub menu items. Okay, so for the sub menu items, the appearance, as you saw, is almost exactly the same as our main menu item. So it's good to actually copy this whole thing. So let's just copy this whole thing, and then we're going to make adjustments according to it. But before that, let me also add the for loop. So we are going to do sub item of item dot sub items, and we are going to track sub item dot label, right? Assuming that the label is unique. And then within this, we are going to just copy the list item that we have. Okay, now let's see what do we need to change here, because it's not exactly the same. So first of all, we don't need the arrow expand and contract one. So we're going to remove this. One thing that we need to change is we need to make this item to sub item here. So let's see, we need to change this to sub item here, sub item dot root. We don't need this toggle nested because this is already a nested item. And we also don't need this selected menu item, because the selected basically adds a border on the left side, which we don't need for our nested items, only for the main items. And this font set, etc., this all remains the same. This item is actually going to become sub item, and in this item is going to become sub item. All right. Okay. Now one more thing is that the root. So the root is not going to be simply the root of the sub item. It is going to be built up on top of the item as well, because it is a nested root. So what we're going to do here is we are going to do item dot root, and we are then going to append forward slash, and then we are going to append the nested root. So this is going to ensure that it's going to go to the correct root. Now let's test this out and see whether this works. Okay, so now when we click on this, you can see our nested roots open up fine. When we click on this, they hide fine. Okay, one thing though, these look exactly like the main roots, the main menu items. What we would like to distinguish them visually is to add a sort of an indentation on the left side. Now, one hacky way of doing this is to add a margin left on this side, but the problem with that is that the whole list item actually moves on the right side, and so that creates some issues in the layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the custom design tokens provided in Angular Material 3, and I'm going to change that instead. That is a better way of doing it. So let's go here and we are going to see what design token actually we need. So here we can see in the mat icon, there is a design token called mat list item leading icon start space. So this is the icon start space when the icon actually starts on the list item. So we would like to increase this is the value is 16 at this point. We would like to increase this so that all of the nested submenu items basically appear visually different from our main this. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a class here. We're going to call this class as indented, and within that we are going to override this. We're going to give a value of 48 pixels here, right? And then this indented class we can give on the sub items here. So we can do this indented. That's fine. Okay, now let's test this out, and you can see that the values are in the menu items are indented, and we can clearly know that this is a nested menu. This is not the main menu. All right, great. So this looks fine, but you'll notice that when we click on any of them and you go in the console, it says that you cannot match any roots. That is because we did not have added any roots for these child components. So along with the roots, we also need to create the components for this. So let's create the pages for these. Ngc a component, and in the pages folder and in the content folder. So we have a pages folder which actually represents the pages for this app, because there are sub pages of this content. So we are going to make this a part of this content folder. We're going to generate them there. So the first one is the videos one, second one is the playlists one, and the third one is the posts one. All right. So we have these three components here. Now we want to change the content a bit to add the router outlet so that the child components can be shown within that same content. So let's add the router outlet here. Let's first import this outlet, and let's add this router outlet here. Okay, great. So now what we need to do is we just need to add the roots, and to add the roots we're going to go in app.roots here, and in the content this component is going to be there because this is the parent component, and within that in the router outlet we're going to show some children here. So the children will be the path videos, and the component is going to be the videos component, right? Similarly, we're going to copy this, and this is going to be playlists, this is going to be the playlist component, and this is going to be posts, and this is going to be the post component here. All right, let's test this out again. And now when you click on this, it expands, and when you click on this, it goes into the subroot, as you can see, and it also highlights that because it is now the active router link, so it highlights those submenu items as before. So our nested sidebar menu actually works really well in this state. But what happens when we do it in the collapse state? So when we click on this icon here, you can see that it collapses, but the indentation remains the same here. So what we actually need is to remove the indentation in the collapse state. So that's not a biggie. We are going to go in our menu item here, and we are going to add this indented on a condition. So let's do class.indented only when the side nav is not collapsed. So if it's open, then we are going to add this indentation. Otherwise, it doesn't make that much sense because we don't have space to show that. So if we now see this here, we can see that the indentation removes here, and in a nice animated fashion as well, because we have transitions added. So you can see this looks nice. Okay, so now the only thing missing now, and the last thing that we'll do in this video, is to add the animations for this. So we would like the animations to match actually the smooth sort of transitions that we have with the existing sidebar as well. So how do we add these animations? Now the first preference for me has always been to add the CSS transitions because they're performant and it takes very little code to set up. But in this case, the problem is that essentially what we need to do is we need to animate the height of this div, this submenu div, from height 0 to height auto. And that is a bit of a problem in CSS. It's not that easy to do in transitions. The second issue is that if I'm show you the code here, you can see that we have an if condition here. So when the nested menu item open, only then this div is sort of inserted into the DOM. And for CSS transitions, we kind of need the div to be always in the DOM so that it can transition between the states. So in these cases, Angular Animations API really fits the bill, and it really helps us in animating things which are inserted into the DOM by Angular or removed from the DOM. So we are going to use the Angular Animations API. So let's start using that, and to do that we are going to first go app.config and verify that we have provide animations here. Okay, and next we are going to go in our menu item here, and we're going to add an animation here at the top. And so first we are going to add a trigger for this. We're going to give it a name, expand contract menu, and then within that we are going to add an array. Then we're going to add our transition Now this is the benefit of Angular Animations API, that we can transition when entering to the DOM as well. We can't do it in CSS. So let's first write enter here, which means when the side nav is going to enter the DOM, what we're going to do. And we are going to add another array here, and we are going to then give the initial style. The initial style is going to have an opacity of 0 because we want to appear sort of a fade in effect. And then we have the more important part, which is the height. Okay, so this will be height 0 pixels. This is the initial starting point of the animation. Then we are going to animate, and first we're going to specify what kind of animation this is. So it's going to be of 500 milliseconds because this is what we do with all of the other animations. And then we are going to use ease in, ease out. And then the final style we are going to specify here. We're going to give the opacity as 1. So it should be completely visible. And then this thing is really important. We want the height to be a static or a wildcard here. Now this wildcard means that Angular is going to automatically find out what the natural state of the element is and is going to animate to that. Now this is something which was missing in the CSS transition as well. There's no way to do that in CSS. We'd have to use some clever JavaScript to do this, which in this case the Angular Animations API handles for us. So this was another reason why we used Angular Animations API here. Okay, so the enter transition works fine, and now we're going to add the exit transition here. So the exit transition is like this, leave, and here we just provide an animate function because the initial style is going to be the expanded state, which we have already provided above. So here we're gonna first tell the same thing, is in, is out, and then the final style, in this case when exiting from the DOM, is going to be opacity 0 again, is going to fade out, and then is going to make the height 0 pixel again. All right. Okay, so this animation is registered here, and now we just want to add it to our DOM. So where do we add it? We add it to this div because this is going to appear and disappear from the DOM based on our if conditions above. So we need the @ symbol, and you see it already provides an option to add this. So we're just going to add this here. Great. So let's now test it out, and let's click on this, and you can see such a nice expand animation and such a nice contract animation. And not only this, this also works in the collapse state. So you can do the same in the collapse state as well, all from the power of the Angular Animations API. Great. So I hope this was helpful, especially for those who have watched the whole YouTube style sidebar tutorial before and you wanted this added in your sidebar. Now, if you want to add some more features and you would like to request that, let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can come up with a future video improving upon this sidebar. And as always, please like and subscribe this video and my channel so that it can reach more people like you. And if you want the code for this, please check out the link in the description, which will lead you to my Buy Me a Coffee page. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.